taking care of her. Questions. What we're going to do here, since we're still waiting for some data, is alter the schedule and maybe just go an hour. So we'll be doing, we're still using comments for their statements.
You have the timekeeper?
That's Lauren's thing. So,
Oh, this is not live. It's not live on the access channel. 2 o'clock.
No, but I actually was wondering about that data. I'm gonna go sit down. I had to listen to
Hi, Leslie.
And we are live now. The home viewing audience is getting a nice display of a very diverse group of participants today. We're looking forward to hearing from them. Welcome all. And while we're waiting for a couple of people to trickle in, I'm going to go ahead and begin the proceedings here. Welcome everyone here and in our at-home viewing audience, and who will hopefully view this online, to our first ever Indivisible Acadiana State Legislative Candidate Forum. This is our first foray into state matters. Our organization is a national group, part of a national movement that was created in January of 2017 upon the election of Donald Trump as president by 3 former congressional staffers who wanted to enable average citizens and voters to interact with their members of Congress and be effective advocates for their causes, and especially in expressing concerns that they might have about the incoming Trump administration. So it all started with something called an Indivisible Guide, which we have on our back table for you to view in hard copy if you'd like. We are now in the 3rd year of Indivisible as a national movement, and in January of this year, January 2019, there were 2 further guides released. One was called Indivisible on the Offense. In the first 2 years, Indivisible made a name for itself nationally through mostly protest activities, including a very notable protest of a town hall with Senator Bill Cassidy by our colleagues in Metairie, which got lots of national attention. But the sense now is that having built on that success and other sorts of protests and rallies and issue initiatives that we've had, we now need to be more proactive in interacting not only with our members of Congress per the new Indivisible on Offense guide, but with our state legislatures, because there was another guide released, Indivisible States. So the idea here is that we as Indivisibles should now be interacting not only with our representatives at the federal level, but with our state representatives as well. And in fact, there are several indivisible organizations from around the country who have actually written legislators that they have put in the hands of their, written legislation that they have put in the hands of their legislators. So we are hoping that today, and getting a preview of some folks who we hope might be elected to the legislature, that we will give them a sense of who we're about, and they'll learn what we're about, And they will see us coming when we come with legislation of our own that we would like to propose. So this forum will have several different phases. First of all, we will have statements from our candidates, 3 minutes each, on the theme of what is their idea of progress for Louisiana, what is their vision. So we're leaving the idea of progress and being progressive very open. We call ourselves a progressive group at Indivisible, but we recognize that that can be defined in different ways. So we want to hear from our candidates about their vision of progress for Louisiana. The second portion will be direct answers from each candidate to a question that they picked randomly from an envelope, and they will respond to that question and again give us a sense not only of how they might respond to the particular question or legislation they might propose on it. We're not going to push them to be that direct. We want to get a sense of how they think about an issue and a problem and the kinds of things that would go into their thinking in addressing it as legislators. In our third portion of our event today, we will have a group discussion of a question that I will pose. Our candidates are wondering why there are red and green paper batons in front of them, and I'll repeat this again, but what will happen in that third session is I will ask the question, we will have a few minutes to think, but someone will want to leap forward and provide their answer to that question, and they'll do that by putting the green for go baton in their cup. Now, if someone wants to respond to that person who has articulated their wonderful perspective on our question, if they want to intervene directly, if they've got something to say at that point, they will pick the red for urgent and put that in their cup. So that's how we will have a sort of orderly discussion that hopefully will be photogenic for our camera viewing audience as well. And then finally, in the end, we will actually have questions from the audience. There are cards scattered about the room, and we encourage you to come up with questions throughout this proceeding. You can do it in response to something they say in their statements, something in their response to their questions. You can address questions to particular people, or if there's an overarching question that you've come here with today or that emerges with you in the course of our discussion, you can write that down. So when we move into our third component, we will send our Indivisible Acadiana secretary, that's Agnes Corville in the back, around to collect your questions, and that will be your opportunity to engage the candidates. So without further ado, and with our notice to our timekeeper, we're going to give each of our candidates in alphabetical order 3 minutes to state their vision of progress in Louisiana. And we begin, and I should say the candidates' names right now, so we'll get them in front of you. We do have Leslie Bork here, who is running for state representative from District 43. Next to her, we have Dana Dugas, our one Republican on the panel, a brave Republican, extra points for that, who is running in District 48. Next to him, we have Rhonda Kim Gleason, running as a Democrat, as is Leslie. Rhonda is running in District 45. Next to her, we have Cami Maturin, who is also a Democrat. She, with Rhonda, is an alumna of the Emerge program, which has sought to push Democratic women into office. So we will hear from her, and she is running for state representative in District 96. And next to Cami, we have David Levy, who is running against Mr. Dugas in District 48. So we'll have a Republican and a Democrat from that district. So without further ado, let's go to Leslie Bork for her take on progress in Louisiana.
So I think, can you hear me? Okay. Progress is such an important word when it comes to why I decided to run for office. I had moved away, and when I returned home with my family in tow, that was the first thing that we realized as a family was the quality of life from when I left to when I got back hadn't progressed forward like I thought it should. I think that progress in this state is sort of just this weird thing that we can't really get a grasp and get a handle on. We have a state that really doesn't embrace change very much. And we should be investing in our workforce, investing in our children, investing in our communities, and investing in equity. And there's no investments that can possibly be made without funding. And our state is very, very reluctant to spend any money or allocate funds correctly to progress forward. At times, we even regress, which is mind-boggling that we really, really can't get a handle on how to go about progressing forward. I think one of the things we need to do is to elevate the good and embrace what we do have that is good, but really address the not so good. And this comes from a macro scale that should be our vision, to really, really fine-tune what is not working and how we can work together with our, opposition, I guess, and stop. We need to compromise. We need to get things done. Right now, we are just all fighting, and there's lack of dialogue. And what I found so much since I've started my campaign is really, really getting your constituents or getting the people involved in the discussion of why Louisiana is not progressing. And a lot of times it isn't party. People are really concerned. They don't really know how to go about it. I don't think our leaders thus far have been encouraging for them to engage. Is that I am constantly asking hard questions and really trying to get everyone involved, because it's our state. This isn't a Republican or a Democrat thing that's going to make us better. It's going to be working together for our state's prosperity and for each other's prosperity.
Thank you. And now we move to Mr. Duga.
Good afternoon, everyone. As y'all can see, I am the only Republican here, and I'm not scared to be here. We need to represent all the people, and that's what my goal is. But for running for office, is everyone needs help. We need progress. Yeah, we need to have a vision for the state. There's no vision. Everybody in the state just reacts to problems. We should be ahead of the problem. We need to get ahead of, the biggest problem I'm hearing is out there knocking on doors is drainage. Everybody's, so concerned with drainage and, jobs. We've been dependent on the oil field for the last 70 years. If we can get the oil field back, great. But we need other industries to come to Louisiana, and we have a great workforce. The biggest thing I'm proud of, I'm president of the Iberia Parish School Board, is we have a career center where we actually are training workers to go to work. We're teaching them skills, welding, carpentry, nursing. We need to be able to supply any industry with workers. And I think, Louisiana is known over the last, century to have a skilled workforce. And, so we need a vision to bring everyone together, both sides of the aisle. Like I said, I'm not as many times I go to Baton Rouge, I talk to, everyone in Baton Rouge. We got to communicate. We got to work together. Just recently I've done a little football camp, and coach told one of his little linebackers to carry the tackling dummy in the field house. I said, look, you get one side, I get the other. We carry it together. Together we can move mountains. But all this fighting and bickering ain't getting us nowhere. We spending our time and energy and not moving forward. That's all I'm after. Let's communicate with each other. Let's not make it, I have to vote this way, I have to vote. Let's look at the problem, find a solution, and let's get it fixed. I've owned a bunch of businesses in my life. My biggest business is a construction business, and I have problems every day. I'm the guy who puts out the fires. When they call me, I'm the one who's coming up with a solution, and that's what we need. We need solutions. Of course we're going to have problems, but we need to get those solutions. But we need to get to a point where we're ahead of the problem instead of just reacting to the problems out there. and that's what I'm hoping I'm gonna bring to the table. And whoever makes it to Baton Rouge, we need to be able to talk to each other. We need to be able to communicate, and and that's what my biggest thing is. I love to talk to people. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we move to Rhonda Kim Gleason.
Are these on? I don't know if they're on. I don't think we need it. Do y'all need it in the back? You do need it? Is it, okay. Okay, good. All right. The question posed is, what does progress look like to me, and how does that relate to my run for the legislative seat in District 45? I have been a teacher. I'm a third-generation educator in this district, in District 45. My family has put 150 years plus of teaching years into the state of Louisiana. I have traveled to 64 parishes with one of my jobs. I know the landscape of this state like the back of my hand. Progress to me is the future. If we want to secure our future, we have got to look to our youth. We've got to look at the things that young people, investors, businesses, we've got to look at the things that are on their checklist. What do they want? And how do we bring them to Louisiana and to Lafayette specifically? So some of the threats that I see in the legislature right now are absolute direct threats to that potential that we have in Louisiana and Lafayette. When we start to impinge on women's health issues, when we are negligent when it comes to our teacher salaries, which, by the way, public schools are the heart of what America stands for. Public schools predate the Constitution. We have got to make sure that we are investing in our public school system. That's why I've got the support of the Louisiana Association of Educators. That is extremely critical. No one invests in communities that have low-performing schools. No one wants to raise their children in communities with low-performing schools. So progress to me is the future regarding education. Progress to me also means healthy water, healthy air, healthy soil, good smart farming practices. We have got the potential right now to change our agricultural direction in this state. We have someone running for the state agricultural commissioner who has an eye on that future, and she is a young person, relatively young person. I'm kind of a young person too, but the thing is, I am absolutely, especially as an educator, every day of my life I'm spent with either my 3 children or students in a classroom. I am tuned in to what young people want. I appreciate our TOPS program, but I don't want the TOPS program sending my kids, my own kids, or any of our children out of Louisiana. You take your TOPS, you reinvest in your state, but we give you something to invest toward. That is progress, and that is the future. Another issue that I think that we really need to approach in our legislature is the constant gridlock and impasse that is produced up there at the Capitol. I've been going to that legislature for 7 years or so. Oh, is it time? Oh,
You can briefly wind up your remarks.
I've been going to that legislature. When we get pamphlets in the mail that say, "Oh, look, this is a kumbaya moment," the incumbent I'm challenging right now sent out a mailer. That mailer is inaccurate. There was impasse, there was discord in that legislature. We need to bring balance back to balance back to the legislature. Our governor, John Bel Edwards, he's got to win. We've got to bring the vote out. And we've got to make sure that we support him with a legislature he can work with. We are on the brink of a supermajority in the legislature this election. This is the election for Louisiana. Next year is very important, but this year is critical for Louisiana, and that to me is progress in our state.
Thank you. So we'll skip to the end of the table. Mr. Levy.
Hi. My vision for progress has to do with how we perceive the purpose of our government. I have 30 years in the oil field, 23 years as a business owner in the oil field. The oil field has changed. The revenue that will be going to the state government has changed. It's a technological change. There's a lot of misinformation as to what's happening. So I think we need to change our perception of what is the purpose of government. The purpose of government is to serve the people. So what we need to do is, one of the things we can do is we can lower the cost of living for poorer people. We can do that by providing services, health services. We need to, we can rehab old properties. We can provide safe living conditions. We can provide these health services and support the public school systems. We only have a limited supply of resources. Those resources are currently being handed out to the corporations, to the oil field, that frankly won't be coming here because the technology has changed, and so it's tight oil now. It's not in the Gulf of Mexico. The Gulf of Mexico is going to produce only so much oil. So what we need to do is we kind of need to tighten our belts, stop handing out the tax exemptions to the non-existent companies that aren't going to come back because the oil is being produced in the tight oil. We need to eliminate the ITEP exemptions. We're not going to bribe the companies to come back in, so let's shut that down. The TIF taxes are also a tax on the poor. So what we're doing is we're taxing the poor without representation, and they are giving that money directly to companies, to corporations through infrastructure, free infrastructure. So what's happening is, as the oil field downsizes, as they use the infrastructure, tear up the roads, they are given tax exemptions, and yet they are using up the infrastructure, and the poor and the regular citizen is paying those costs. We also, we have got to do something about climate change. Just 2 days ago, we dumped water on Beaumont, and there were massive floods. We have to begin to address that problem. We can do that here. We can do that by methane and controlling the release of methane. We can do that by restrictions on the way that we produce oil and gas. We need to bring the finite resources that we're receiving right now need to go back into the community for public education, public infrastructure, and public services.
Thank you. And now we go back to Cammie Matron.
I want to start by saying progress is moving forward. Our state has not moved forward in some time now. For 10 years, I've watched the legislators pass the bucket from one to another. We as a state are failing our young kids, our youth, our education, our criminal justice. That's all failing because it has become a private-based industry. It has become for-profit, and our education system and our criminal justice system, until we change that, will always be a negative in our society. Progress in our state. For-profit mentality needs to stop. Many people in this state look at how much money they can make off of our criminal justice system, off of our education system, off of our kids. We need to worry more about how well our kids are functioning in a school system. We need to worry about how we can stop overcharging and over-incarcerating. Our elderly are also suffering. We are really failing our kids. And for 10 years, I've watched our state go backwards in the education system. I teach public school education. And to watch that go backwards, it is very disturbing for me. I see the kids that I teach struggle in math, in English, just to try to get to where they need to be able to read, to be able to do 2 + 2. As a state representative, one of the goals I have is to put our education system back to where the kids learn at their own progress. Right now, they must all learn on the same spectrum. There's about 25, 30 people in this room. Well, there's 25, 30 different styles of learning. And if we can't teach our children on their style of learning, we will always digress and go backwards. In order to progress this state, we need to focus on our kids, we need to focus on our education, and we need to focus on how our criminal justice system can all be wrapped around and stop taken away. We take away from education and healthcare every time there is a budget crisis. We need to focus on changing the Constitution and stop letting our budgets, our legislator take away from those two when we have a crisis. We take away from the two things that we actually need to survive in this state, but yet we put back into our criminal justice system, or we put back into different departments that actually could get cut. And we need to start, another way to progress is stop wasteful spending. We have to stop wasteful spending here in Louisiana. If we stop wasteful spending, we can put more money into our education system and our youth development. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, Mr. Corey Levier has joined us, so we welcome him. But we'll go to Ms. Thompson to get her statement of what is progress in Louisiana first, and then Mr. Levier.
Okay. Hi, my name is Quinta Thompson. Progress in Louisiana. What it looks like to me is not what's going on right now. Too often, we have children who, like Cammie said, they can't read. I teach at the high school level. I teach public school mathematics, and I have children that I can't help because they can't read simple directions, and yet they're in our high school classes. And I just look at them and I say, you know, we failed you. I failed you. The teachers before you failed you. Your parents have failed you. Everyone's failed you because we're more focused on passing a test, and we're teaching to a test rather than basic skills. It's easy to memorize a few items in order to get through a test, but that's not helping our children. If we want progress for Louisiana, we need to invest in them, in their future. We also need to look around at the people we have struggling right now. We have people who are trying to decide between buying groceries or paying a bill. You know, do we need electricity this month, or do we need water this month? And that's something that in this modern society, our citizens shouldn't have to choose between. And then we see, you know, we look at the legislature now, and they're making senseless budget cuts. They cut the things that we need most. You want people to be able to live in a society, thrive in a society, and give back to the society. But we also need to give to them. Our families are being torn apart, not because they want to, but because it's a necessity. You have families who aren't getting married. You have parents who aren't getting married because they need to live off of government assistance, because the assistance we have is set up to keep them where they are. It's not to give a hand up. And that's what we need to change. We need to encourage them that this is something temporary. It's not something shameful. It's just something to give you a little help. But then eventually we expect you to be able to move on and to do better for yourself, and then for you to be able to give back to the next generation, to the next people who may fall in rough times. You know, we all just saw a spike in gasoline over the weekend. And, you know, I know people who are now trying to figure out if they're going to be able to have a tank of gas to go to work. Well, what does that happen? What happens if they can't make it to work? Then they'll lose their job, and then they fall in a pit of despair. Our health care is all over the place. It's in shambles. We need to address the mental health issues here in our society and do everything to improve from our youngest to our oldest members.
Thank you. And we will hear from our last candidate today, but before we do, Ms. Thompson, could you tell me the question that you have on the card before you?
Okay, my question is about mental health.
Excellent. Okay, we'll get back to that in just a minute. We'll hear from our final candidate, our one senatorial candidate. That is Mr. Corey Levier, running in Senate District 24.
Thank you for having me. I am Corey Levier, running for Senate in District 24. My ballot number is 55. And progress in Louisiana looks like my children being safe, educated, having an opportunity to do exactly what they want to do as long as no one's getting hurt. There are many different things that as human beings we are able to do. And in District 24, I've talked to many people who do not feel as if our children and sometimes even ourselves have the opportunities to accomplish the things that we choose to accomplish. And progress in Louisiana for me would be my children being able to be safe anywhere they go, have a reassurance of security anywhere they are, you know, not being afraid in any way to, if they step out of line but no one gets hurt, that they might be accosted or even killed, or and change the nature of using violence to solve our problems here in District 24. I'm from Opelousas, Louisiana. I grew up on the Hill, very proud of that. And when I was young, we naturally solved our problems as young people. We solved our problems by, you know, arguing. We solved our problems by fighting, physically fighting with our fist. And, you know, and then I joined the Army and understood what fighting meant on a global scale. And I am certain that the Americans living in District 24, that we can come up with a way to use other tools to solve the problems, and not just use them ourselves, but effectively and permanently teach our children to use the correct tools to address the problems that they have at home, at school, and anywhere else they might go. I do believe that we can solve many issues in District 24 without the loss of life, without the loss of economics, without the loss of rights and values and morality. We can solve these problems without increasing taxes. There's many things that we can do to alleviate the burden that we place on one another sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we move to the next second portion of our conversation today with questions that each of our candidates have chosen randomly from an envelope. And we will again go in alphabetical order. First, hearing from Leslie Bork on minimum wage and living wage. I'll read the question. 80% of Louisianians support an increase in the state minimum wage, but the Louisiana Legislature voted overwhelmingly against a proposal to let the citizens of Louisiana vote to increase the minimum wage from the current federal minimum of $7.25 to $9, even as other states and localities have joined the Fight for 15, that's a $15 minimum wage movement. So the question is, do you think Louisiana needs to raise its minimum wage or ensure a living wage for workers in our state?
Okay, so it's a great question, and as I said in my opening statement, how we progress, we need to invest in our workers. And we need to ensure that Louisiana workers get their fair share when it comes to our state's prosperity. And Louisiana workers are the power behind our economy. And yet we have not seen a raise in minimum wage since 2009. That to me tells volumes as far as what we are, how we are respecting or compensating our people in this state that want to work, that have a right to work and should be getting paid accordingly. I do believe in raising the minimum wage. And one of the things that I don't understand why Louisiana hasn't connected dots and progress like other states. Why are we not competing nationally with other states? Why are we not paying attention to what they're doing? It says right here that other states and localities have joined the fight for $15 minimum wage. And we can't even let voters decide on our own if we believe our state should increase our minimum wage. Like I said earlier in my opening statements, to give voters and people that live in this state their opportunity to voice how they feel our state should go is integral to us succeeding. The legislators that are making these laws, they're not the ones making minimum wage. They're not. So it doesn't behoove them to drastically do something for their families. Their families are fine, okay? And I believe that for us to stick to such a low minimum wage is critical to why we're not succeeding. We need to fight for all of our people, and again, I'm going to keep saying for an overall prosperity, not just the wealthy and let the poor fend for themselves. The poor are the ones that are going to be wanting a raise. Of course they are. But if we neglect that this doesn't take our whole entire state to another level, people feeling safe that they can work a full-time job and get their ends met, get their ends met. Right now they're not. A lot of them aren't. And they're working multiple jobs and, trying to do the best they can, but they just can't survive on this. So yes, I definitely believe in an increase in minimum wage.
Thank you. Okay, we now move to Mr. Duga and a question on voting rights. Somewhat longer question. Louisiana is a state that has historically had difficulties implementing the Voting Rights Act of 1965. In recent years, since the Supreme Court Shelby County versus Holder decision in 2013, Louisiana has been one of the top states closing polling places and is thought to be similarly high in purging voters' names from rolls. Its voting machines are thought to be weak and open to attack, and they lack a paper trail. Louisiana recently decided to purchase new voting machines, but the bidding process was ridden with corruption, and as a result, we do not have updated voting machines for this 2019 election cycle. The legislature that we elect this cycle, however, will get the results of the 2020 census and administer the process of redistricting and reapportionment, raising further questions about the dilution of the voting impact of racial and ethnic minorities. So the question is, what measures should the Louisiana legislature take to protect voting rights and ensure voter access in Louisiana, while also ensuring the integrity of our elections and fairness in the redistricting process?
Great. All right, yeah. Actually, Louisiana's number 3 in the state in something. We're number 3 in per capita voter registration. So the number of citizens in Louisiana can qualify to vote are actually registered. But we're third to last in voter turnout. We need to make it easier for people to vote. We're getting ready to start next Saturday, a week from today, with our early voting section. We're going to actually be able to vote, voters be able to go out for a whole week and vote. And my thoughts on that is I would love for us to have, we have all these little special elections, and we need to cut all that out. We need to have a voting week once a year where we give our citizens a whole week to go out to vote. We used to call it absentee voting back because apparently I'm the oldest one out here, and also, but with the early voting, we've seen more and more people taking advantage of early voting. What I would love to see is, instead of having, I know in Iberia Parish we have one voting place for early voting, but in the future I would love for us to have some of the hot spots of early voting, where, like, let's pick on Iberia Parish and say in Lorville, Jeanerette, Delcombe, Coteau, and Iberia, we have 5 voting places to be able to vote for the whole week. Make it convenient for people to vote. And yes, we definitely need to make sure our voting machines are, up to date. We need to make sure when people actually vote, they're getting a chance to vote. I have friends at the clerk's offices because I pull legal descriptions a lot, and one of the little girls I was talking to, she's in charge of setting up the voting machines, and she was so happy there was no blocking and there was a little girl in St. Martin Parish, and all her machines, whoever walks up to them can vote, because you have sometimes you're blocked out where you think you can vote for one district and you're not, you're in another district. And so, we need to make it more convenient for people to vote, but we need to get voter turnout. If we get this election we're in is very important. And I'll be excited if we get more than a 60% turnout. And I'm thinking it's going to be a 50% turnout. It means half the people who are registered to vote are actually, telling us who they want, whether they want me or one of my opponents elected. It's important. It's important that we go out and vote. It's important we make it convenient for people to vote. And, so we need to work on our voting systems. And I took up my time, so thank y'all.
Thank you. Now we move to Ms. Gleason with a shorter question, but somewhat more pointed. A Colorado initiative to provide reversible long-acting contraception to low-income and teenage women resulted in a 40% drop in births to teens and a 35% reduction in the number of abortions from 2009 to 2013 in Colorado. Rates of pregnancy and abortion have been falling since 2011, reportedly due in part to the contraceptive coverage under the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. What is your view of the government's role in assuring affordable and accessible contraception, and will you propose such measures in the Louisiana Legislature?
Thank you for letting me, letting this be one of the choices. Number one, I believe in the Affordable Care Act. I believe that what our governor has done with expanding Medicaid and with making sure that folks have health care in Louisiana is critical. It kind of ties back to what I said earlier about how women can have their autonomy, make their own decisions. I wish that abortion was not something that we needed to discuss. But this is where we are right now. In our particular government, it's kind of a moot point, and we've got to deal with the outcome of that. But one way, of course, to reduce the need for abortions is to have accessible contraception for women of childbearing age. That, to me, is a no-brainer. I know that there are religious precepts that might argue that. I myself am a Christian, I'm a Catholic, my children are Episcopalian, but the thing is, how we care for ourselves, the decisions that we can make for ourselves as women are not necessarily incongruous to our faith. And so if we can support women, especially our most vulnerable women, where it hurts them economically, we've got to do that. I 100% believe in bolstering that and keeping that connected to the Affordable Care Act. Colorado's initiative regarding contraception is very, again, progress-minded, forward-thinking. We've got a lot we can sort of learn from Colorado of late, and so, I'm very open to that option for our young women, and that ties back to making our state more desirable for young people to know that we are a state that backs women, that we are a state that backs the choices that they can make, and that will actually bring and help our economy, bring us closer to where we want to be in terms of progress economically.
Thank you. And we now move to Mr. Levier with a question that I'll preface because it's a very important question for Indivisible. You may see behind our candidates today a poster saying defund hate. This is actually an initiative of the month for Indivisible nationwide that is aimed at addressing abuses associated with the detention of immigrants. Indivisible has argued that when we fund the Customs and Border Patrol and immigration and customs enforcement agencies and don't insist that the portion of those funds go to humanitarian aid for the immigrants that we have in detention, that there is something really wrong with that and that we may need to cut the funding as a result. So that's what the defund hate program is about. But Mr. Levier's question has to do with where a large and increasing number of our detained immigrants are being held, namely in private prisons. So the question is, at the federal level, the Obama administration was phasing out the use of private prisons, but they have come back under Trump, and stocks in private prison corporations have skyrocketed as a result. With several new immigrant detention centers opened in Louisiana just in the last few months, Louisiana is becoming a national center for immigration detention, and private prison corporations and sheriff's offices are profiting greatly as a result. The state of California recently passed legislation banning the use of private prisons. Yet, having enacted bipartisan criminal justice reform to reduce Louisiana's prison population, Louisiana now seems to be substituting migrants for criminals and becoming an incarceration capital once again. So the question is the use of private prisons to outsource government penal functions for profit ever warranted? And what measures as a state legislature will you pursue to investigate and address the use of private prisons to detain criminals or immigrants in Louisiana? Mr. Levier.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I would like to let everyone know that I am a man of God. First, foremost, without exception, without shame. And I do not agree with putting a human being in a cage as a solution to society's problems, unless they're a danger to themselves or a real danger to someone else. Our prisons, and I have to say our, even though I did not myself personally create them, as an American and an adult, I have to take responsibility for what we have allowed to be created right here in our state. I disagree completely with the idea of putting you in a cage if I disagree with you about something or you don't see things the way that I do. If you harm me or my family or attempt to shed our blood, I understand. I might have to put you in a cage to separate you from those that would be harmed because you are moving around freely. But I do not believe that God, in any form, however you interpret God, agrees with putting a human being in a cage to solve our problems. And too many of us are in cages right now, disconnected from their families, disconnected from their livelihoods, disconnected from opportunities to create a legacy for themselves and their families, for things that are unwarranted. I have friends of mine I've visited in prison, visited in jail. It is a demoralizing experience to be put into a cage and you haven't hurt anyone. So is the use of private prisons to outsource government penal functions for profit ever warranted? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. To profit off the misery of human beings is a sin and a shame that America must wash itself free from. Simply put, in Louisiana, my ancestors that look like me and me have always lived with the fear of being put into a box or beaten for things that human beings should be able to agree or disagree upon and do it in a way that makes sense. I no longer fear being put in a cage, because when I became an adult, I learned about things that happened before I was alive. Thank you. Martin Luther King was put in a cage several times. I want you to go and look, and as a human being, use your heart to see if you would make the decision to put him in the cage for the things that he was put into a cage for. And then disagree with me if you dare. It should never be profited. Human misery should never be profited on. It is something we must wash from the conscience of our country.
Thank you for that answer. And some reaction from the audience. I would remind the audience that we do have cards out with pens scattered around the room. So if a particular question for any of our candidates or all of them is occurring to you, write that down. We will be collecting them a bit later. But first, we're going to hear from Mr. Levy on another juicy question, which I will read, having to do with public interest information. The question reads, citizens and political advocacy groups can only take actions on issues of which they have knowledge. In the 2019 legislative session, Lafayette area Representative Stuart Bishop sponsored a bill to allow oil and gas corporations to conduct their own environmental impact audits, which would then be kept confidential and could not be used to penalize them. The measure, labeled a Public Secrecy Act by environmental groups, was withdrawn, but only after narrowly failing in a House vote. It is rumored the bill could return. Do you support the availability of information in the public interest when corporations seek to keep it private? And what arguments would you make for or against such legislation if it resurfaced during your term in the legislature? Mr. Levy.
Allowing those corporations to keep that information secret is insanity. This is the problem with our government and what we've lost what the purpose of our government is. So it makes no sense that there is not government oversight on this. What has happened with Mr. Bishop, with Mr. Barra, who is the incumbent in the seat that I'm running for, is that they're completely subservient to money. Mr. Barra forced a $3 million cost on the citizens of Louisiana to force through a Kushner family website to account for payments to the state. So the point is that Mr. Bishop, Mr. Barra, Clay Higgins, John Kennedy, Bill Cassidy, they're all completely owned by money. They're completely owned. What we need to do is we need to take government back. You need to stop voting these people in. We can't continue this. The oil companies cannot police themselves. They will never police themselves. What these politicians are doing is they are trying to privatize everything. They are going to split it up, and they are going to give it to themselves, is what is going to happen. They're just going to complete this circle and fund themselves and continue to pay themselves. In our particular race, with me and Mr. Duga, there is over $300,000 going to be spent between the other two candidates for a District 48 state representative seat. That is insane. So we can't allow corporations to not have oversight. They must have oversight. The auto insurance industries the premiums are too high. For the only reason is that there's no oversight. We can't allow oil companies to not have, be required to have oversight by government to protect the people that go out offshore and work. You know, another example is the Deepwater Horizon accident. Well, it's not an accident. It was a criminal. It was criminal. So 11 people were killed. No one went to jail. All of the fines that are going to be paid by BP are going to eventually be written off on their taxes with respect to the revenue that they're going to make over the years. So they are going to not only never have anybody went to jail, but they are going to be made whole because they fund and purchase all of these politicians. John Kennedy, Bill Cassidy, Clay Higgins, Mike Johnson, all of these people are purchased. It has to, Ralph Abraham, completely purchased. You're going to have to figure out some way to boot all these people out and reclaim the government.
Thank you. We now move to Cami Maturin for a question on children. Children cannot vote, but they are Louisiana's future. Louisiana is last in nearly every indicator of child well-being, though there have been some recent gains in early childhood education. According to the 2019 Kids Count report of the Annie E. Casey Foundation, 28% of Louisiana children live in poverty, the highest of any state. 81% of Louisiana children are not proficient at math, again, the highest of any state. Louisiana children rank between 48 and 50 in indicators of economic well-being, education, and family and community, and only slightly better for health, coming in at 42. It is number 10, Louisiana's number 10 for teens not in school and not working. So the question is, what do you consider to be the most important issues facing children in Louisiana today, and what policy should the Louisiana legislature take to support children in Louisiana?
This is a great question because everything in our state revolves around our children and our education. Our children are our future, and if we're going to continue to progress in Louisiana, we have to take care of our children. The first question is, what do I consider the most important issues for children is lack of education. We're pushing our children along and they are not educated. You can only hold a child back so many years so many times between K through second. So if the child doesn't know their ABCs, they might wind up in third grade and not know what an A, a B, or C is. I think that is failing our kids. Our biggest thing with poverty is our kids sometimes go home to an empty house because their parents have to work multiple jobs. They don't have anybody to help them with homework. The reason our math scores are so horrible is because of the program they have us teaching. They had us doing Common Core, Eureka Math, different types of math depending on where you were in the state. And one of the questions couldn't be 2 plus 2. Well, the answer's 4. But if you didn't put the little circles or the boxes or whatever else went with it, the whole question was wrong. So what you're telling these kids are, you got the answer right, but it's wrong. 2 plus 2 is 4 in every book that I've seen. So lack of education and lack of support in the education system. Also, discipline. We need to find a way to handle our discipline better in our education system. Because in my experience, I've seen teachers focus on certain kids and profile certain kids, and whatever's in their jacket follows them from year to year. And one teacher may say this kid is whatever in this class, but yet that same teacher is going to take that into their class. That is unfair to our kids. Now, what policies would I change? I'd change how we teach our children. We have to get rid of the for-profit curriculum that they are throwing at our teachers to teach. The curriculum that the Department of Education threw at our elementary school teachers it is a time curriculum. You have to teach whatever you're teaching in a certain amount of time. If your kids don't get it, you can't go back and reteach it. You got to keep going. Also, we can't allow our kids to teach help them teach peer teaching. If the kid has it wrong, the teacher has to keep going. She can't explain why it's wrong. This curriculum is going to fail our students. Any help in the classroom that the teachers have had have got to be relieved from the classroom. In other words, the state is coming in The State Department is coming in to check classrooms to make sure there is nothing that does not coincide with this curriculum in the classroom. So that means anything to help our kids succeed have to be taken out of the classroom. That is policies that we need to change. Our kids are suffering. Our economy is suffering because of our education. So my goal in the legislature is to change how we educate our kids and start worrying more about their education and their future. Thank you.
Thank you. And we move to Ms. Thompson now for a question on mental health, opioids, and drugs. All too often, mental health has been overlooked as a part of healthcare policy. Former Governor Bobby Jindal dismantled much of the mental health care system in Louisiana, and now we're faced with a national opioid addiction epidemic that is straining the system that is left. Within the last few weeks, a well-regarded addiction treatment and detox program at our University Health Center in Lafayette has been threatened with closure. Vaping, promoted among other things as a way to address nicotine addiction, is turning out to have its own dangers. Meanwhile, the push to legalize marijuana for medical and recreational purposes is gaining in popularity. So the question is, what policies should our state legislature pursue to address mental health deficits, stem the opioid crisis, and permit reasonable and beneficial uses of cannabis?
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that I currently serve on the Governor's Board of Mental Health here for Lafayette. In addition to that, I was a mental health professional for several years, and I could see the cycle. I could see the cycle from one generation to the next. The first thing we need to do is stop stigmatizing people for mental health problems. I think these things, I'm glad they're put together in one question because they are linked. A lot of times, mental health patients, because they didn't want to be thought of as a shame on their family, may have self-medicated. And part of that led to their addiction to opioids. Also, I believe the rising costs of reasonable healthcare methods have contributed to many people using whatever was available to them, whether it was legal or illegal, getting prescriptions from other family members, from family members who are deceased. And of course, even though it may be a safe drug, without the oversight of a physician, it was causing many problems. I feel that this issue is being brought to the light now, but it's been an issue for a very long time. And what we can do is start early. We see a lot of children in our school system who may have a parent in prison, may have lost a parent, maybe their parents were really young, so they're being raised by a grandparent, and they're not receiving counseling for that. And that can lead to many other issues. Self-esteem, built up anger. You know, there's just so much that we can do young. And if by investing in those children at a young age, we're actually going to save our state a fortune because we won't be incarcerating people for their mental illness. We won't have crimes being committed so that they could support their addiction. We also have to look at, in terms of the opioid crisis, other things that, not just mental health, but other things that are leading to the use of these drugs. So people having to work multiple jobs who are on their feet, 18 hours a day, and then again self-medicating to take care of those injuries. They don't have the ability to recuperate properly because they have to get back to work. And I don't know if anyone here has ever taken some type of opioid, but when you're coming off of it, it's horrible. So I can see the need for people, they feel they have to take more and more. So, fortunately, I just try to avoid it so I don't have that downfall at all. Additionally, things like legalizing marijuana, I'm more for decriminalizing it. It's not necessary that we have to put someone in jail for a decade behind experimenting with a drug, and something that's, also being glamorized in the media. So that's all I would have to say on that matter.
Thank you. Okay, so we're at our halftime, and let me summarize a bit where we've been and where we'll be going in the next half. We have all benefited, I think, from these wonderful candidates who are not only running and are to be commended for that, but came to join us today. We have actually heard from them on some very interesting questions in which each of them seem to have a real distinctive expertise, or maybe they're just that smart and worthy of your vote. But where we're moving now is an opportunity for our candidates to insert a bit more of themselves into the content of what we're doing here, and perhaps even to engage with each other. We're going to have a discussion that will be largely about the theme of what, besides the issues that we've already discussed, would be your legislative priorities. And I want to contextualize that a little bit. We actually had a much longer list of questions. We didn't even get to many of our environmental questions: climate change, renewable energy, and the Green New Deal, which is close to indivisible hearts, the possibility of a green jobs economy. In healthcare, we didn't get to address the assault that is still going on by Senator Bill Cassidy, Attorney General Jeff Landry, among others, on the Affordable Care Act. We talked about contraception, but we didn't talk specifically about abortion and the reduction in women's rights that happened with the last legislature, which is prompting many to consider, what are we going to do with a post-Roe Louisiana? What sort of protections do we need to provide women and children and families then? We did not address we addressed the issue of immigrant detention a bit, but we didn't examine the broader question of immigration, what immigrants add to our economy. We might want to talk about that. We didn't talk about gun violence, protest rights, religion in schools, LGBTQ rights, net neutrality. So there are a number of issues that could have been on our table, as well as some in the economics field. We spoke about minimum wage. We didn't hear about agriculture and tariffs and what the new Trump policies are doing in Louisiana, the possibility of international trade for Louisiana, maybe a way to get around these tariffs with some legislative intervention from our state legislators. So there's a lot on the table. So what we're going to do now is, having thrown some of these other issues out and knowing that our candidates have their own pet projects and concerns and reasons for running, I'm going to ask them to indicate now what would be their priorities. And the way we'll do it is they have red and green pieces of paper in front of them. If any of them are all ready right now to give us their top project as a legislature, they can indicate that by putting their green piece of paper into the cup in front of them as they speak. If individuals have direct responses to something that they've heard, very brief addenda or statements of what you would do on that issue or do differently, you can let us know. But I see we already have a green bar inserted in a cup from Mr. Levier. We're not going to be timing this, but please keep your remarks as succinct as possible so we can get as many perspectives in as we can. Mr. Levier.
Thank you once again. I consider myself to be a breaker of cycles. I've broken cycles in my family. People around me have broken cycles in their family. So I guess I would have to say I am a cycle breaker. And a cycle that has plagued our communities, my community, is parenting. And I know that in order to be an effective, and that depends on what you think an effective parent is, you have to be educated on what it means to be a parent. And a lot of children have grown up in single-parent homes, in homes that do not reflect a whole family. And when I say whole family, mother, father, children. Everybody understand? And if you are attempting to parent as a family, I do believe that there is a certain education that is needed. And if you look around you, If you look at the young people from birth to 4 years old, if you are not aware or educated on certain things, you can actually be a detriment to your own child. Would anybody disagree with that? Y'all got to get involved. I was in the Army too long. I need some action. We're talking to you. By show of hands, does anybody believe that a parent from parent of a child from 0 to 4 should receive education on how to be a parent of a child from 0 to 4? Raise show of hands. Ideal. But we should strive for the ideal. And from 4 to 14, there's an education required. From 14 to 25, there's an education. How should you address your child? How should you be a parent? And I believe that as a parent, in some ways I have failed. As a parent, there's a very strong possibility in some ways you have failed. But if we educate parents, if we educate one another on how to be great parents, is up? Oh, you're not timing.
You can briefly
Okay,
conclude.
here we go. I want to create a parenting university in every city in my district where parents can go and find out, critique themselves to improve their families. I also want to ensure that early childhood development is happening in every family in my district. When you develop a child early, right, there's a book that I favor, and it says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he shall not depart from it. I've been all over the world, but those words ring true if you ask my mama. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, and Mr. Levy, you can remove your green paper from the cup, and we will go on to Ms. Thompson, Ms. Matron, and then Mr. Levy. Ms. Thompson.
Can we comment on
You have okay, we do have an interjection. No, that's what it's there for. Please, Ms. Bork, let us know.
Not really an interjection so much. Yeah, I guess just a comment. I guess I'm not understanding your university. And I mean, is it like therapy for not therapy, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I'm a mom, and when I became a mom, read all the textbooks and tried to be as educated as I was on, how I was going to be this perfect mom. And at some point, I had to throw the textbook away and just really kind of learn my children's behaviors and not saying I'm not always questioning. I, often feel like I'm failing as a mom as well. But I guess I don't really understand your university.
Let me help you a little bit.
We have a 30 to 60 second response on that.
When I say university, what's the first thing comes to your mind?
Schooling, education.
Schooling,
right.
education. So imagine if there was a place in your community that when the books stopped working, when the tears were at night and you crying in the morning, the only thing you have the energy to do is just get dressed and get out of the house so you can function properly because you're at wit's end. Imagine in your community if there was a place called Parenting University and you can go there and people in your community, people that are going through the same exact thing you're going through, are there to say, listen, girl, this is what I did, right? And their answers have been critiqued and vetted by the rest of the community, where you can go and agree and disagree with people on what it means to be a great parent. Because iron sharpens iron. And if there was a place like that, I'm sure that it would benefit you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Wonderful question and comment, because it's stimulating all these red bars. And I think I saw Quinta Thompson's first and then Rhonda Gleason's second. Oh, okay.
No, I was green and then I went red. 'Cause I wanted to go
Rhonda
back
was first.
Before, you just
Yeah,
wanted
so-
to flip,
yeah.
okay.
Not on flip.
Will you be taking your red chance now, or?
No, Quinta went first.
Okay.
You did go red first.
No, let's go first. If you want me to go first,
I'll go first. All right, so I just want to say, I appreciate your point of view and the concept of parenting university. I will say that when I was in high school, I had a wonderful opportunity to take a child development class with Ms. Dalton Gary at Acadiana High School. And do y'all hear me? Are y'all okay? Y'all are good. All right. So I think outreach is fantastic. I'm an advocate for outreach. I work outside of the classroom myself. We can absolutely address issues like that in our public school system. We should be teaching our children emotional intelligence skills. That's where the critical mass begins. And as we engage them and grow them into adults who have their families, we have taught them the fundamentals of child development. We have taught them the fundamentals of adolescent psychology. We've taught them all those things that we learn as educators in our own pedagogy. So I agree with what you're saying, and in that way, I think that what we need to do is, again, rely on our public school systems as to serve in the way they need to serve us. Of course, yeah. Of course, there's going to be external groups that help out, but we really need to make sure we're bolstering that in our school system, because that's where we can reach everyone. Our kids spend more time in that school than they do outside of the schools and with this at home. So we can actually encourage that from the start.
So now we're really getting into it. We've got red bars for Ms. Thompson and Mr. Dugas. So Ms. Thompson and then Mr. Dugas on the parenting concept.
Okay, I guess first I should clarify that I'm not a parent, but I do believe I've mothered many children. I'm an aunt. I have friends with children. I'm a school teacher. So, I've fixed my share of boo-boos and things like that. But I don't like the idea of always making it someone else's job. I think maybe if we can educate people before they become parents, it would be much better. Like I said, I work in a high school setting, and I see some girls who think it's going to be cute. It's an accessory. It's not a pet. I've had talks with girls and boys, and I tell them both, until you're 22, I don't even want to see you owning a plant, because you need to take care of yourself. You need to raise yourself at this point, because there's only so much that can be done externally. We do have programs here like Early Steps to help those who are struggling. And several people mentioned books, but until you're in the thick of it, those books really aren't going to help. It's really great that people write books, but not in this matter, I believe. Every situation is different. Every child is different. Every pregnancy is different. Every
person.
Yeah, every childhood is going to be different. I think my mom relied a lot on her mother, and her mother relied on her mother. And, fortunately, my father was very involved in our upbringing. He didn't leave it as solely my mother's job. But I also think that we can reach out and help parents. Recently, my dad has become like a school dad, because we have many children there who don't have someone to root for them. And I'm like, really, I'm so unathletic. My dad would have loved to be at my games. He'll come to your games. So I think that, can help, rather than building a private university.
No,
I mean, like a
We'll hear
separate
from
schooling
Mr.
system.
Dugas now, and then we'll go on to Ms. Thompson's legislative priority.
Yeah, again, I'm a grandpa, so I'm definitely older than most. But growing up in rural Louisiana and Lorville, we grew up at grandma's house. Sundays was at grandma's, and that's what I think we're missing today is, our families. It's a fast world. I remember growing up in Lorville, and we was going to go visit my uncle in Youngsville. 2 weeks before that, we planned a trip to Youngsville. We live in such a fast pace today, but I think with family, we need to slow down and my grandma was old when I was growing up. My great grandma was real old, and they whipped us, and but they were there to teach my mama how to raise us. They taught me how to raise my kids, and I think that's what we're missing is, that mentor. Kind of like we touched on education, and when President Jindal made all these stupid changes, he really destroyed our teachers. I lost 390 teachers that first year he had enacted Act 1.
Thank God he wasn't president.
Thank you so much. And but he played with our teachers And we lost those 390, we lost those mentors. In childhood development, I think we're losing those mentors because one of my grandmas never worked a day in her life outside the home. Now she worked. She cooked for us every day. She took care of us, but now mom and daddy works. And, so nobody's really taking time to raise your kids. I told my kids, don't date till you're 25. At least my daughter listened to me. We need to be a little bit more mature. And everybody thinks, oh, I'm ready for the world. No, the world's crazy out there. So I think we need to work with together. It takes a village to raise a child, and I think we need to go back to that. And thank you.
Okay, I'm going to exert some moderatorial authority here and notice that both Ms. Gleason and Mr. Levier have red bars, but Mr. Levier, begging your indulgence, having benefited already from this wonderful question. Let's go on to Ms. Thompson, hear her legislative priority, and then we've got Ms. Matra, Mr. Levy, and Ms. Gleason queued up. So, Ms. Thompson.
Okay, I have a couple of priorities, one being education that I think several of us have spoken passionately about. But I guess I'd talk about right now safety. We're seeing these massive shootings occur in our school, so I guess it does tie back to education. I hate that I have to spend a portion of my day not teaching children about reading and writing, but how to take cover and hide and defend themselves against an active shooter. That's just, to me, that's unimaginable, that they're growing up and this is the norm for them. I was in school when Columbine occurred, and we were outraged. It was, how could this happen? Did anybody see this coming? And now it's become, oh yeah, that happened last week. There'll probably be another one next week. My kids are so desensitized to this. I know we're the sportsman's paradise, and frankly, I actually learned how to first shoot at school, at freshman high, in PE. And I do love shooting for sport, but as it being a sport, I don't need 100 rounds to be released in a minute. When the Second Amendment was written, it took over a minute to load one single shot. And so that's not what our founding fathers were thinking of when they created the Second Amendment. So I think that's something that we really have to take a look at as a society and learn that, as much as I'm a Catholic and Christian and believe in prayer, that giving prayers and thoughts after something we could have prevented occurred is not enough.
Thank you, and I see Ms. Gleason has a red bar. Mr. Levier, did you also want to comment on this?
No,
Okay.
I'm
You
waiting for
can,
get back to
okay. Ms. Gleason, go ahead and give us your comment.
Oh, well, I just wanted to acknowledge what Ms. Thompson said about our gun violence issues in the United States that are specific to the United States. So 100 people a day die by gunshot. The number has increased in the last 3 years from 94 to 100. We absolutely have an issue with gun violence in America. I am a Southern gal. My son had his orange card when he was 10 years old. He is now serving in the Air Force, actually part of our military, and he is now the fourth generation of my family and my branch of the family to serve in the Air Force. So I take human casualty very seriously. As an educator, my goal is to bring the best for my students and to give them futures. And what I don't appreciate as well is having the knowledge of how to bar a door and protocol to close a window and to darken the room. And I don't like my young children learning active shooter drills. In the gubernatorial debate the other night, our governor addressed semi-automatic weapons. And yes, any gun that fires, that is not a single shot or a bolt action gun, is a semi-automatic weapon. But the fact that an AR-15 can fire 100 rounds in a minute is different. And if you have a hollow point shot, you're going to destroy whatever that bullet makes contact with. That is a military-grade weapon. So, again, I agree with the Sportsman's Paradise concept. When my son comes home with, a bunch of ducks, and I'm just waiting for him to bring a deer home, but the thing is, that's different than what's happening in our national crisis regarding gun violence prevention. And most people in our country want some general gun violence prevention awareness and basic logical gun violence prevention laws. So I think that most people do agree with that, no matter where you're from, Louisiana, Massachusetts, doesn't matter. So totally back that.
And I see that we have red bars from Mr. Dugas, then Mr. Levier, then Ms. Mathurin. We can keep going like this. At some point, I'm going to call for other people's priorities. But I do want to remind you that this is your opportunity to write your own questions on the cards that are scattered them around. Agnes can take them in the back, bring them up here, and we'll get them into the discussion as well. But let's hear from Mr. Dugas on the question here.
I actually wanted to defer to Mr. Levy,
Yes.
if you don't mind, because he was waiting. He had his green bar up the whole time.
Well, we're waiting. Do you have something on this point, though, about gun violence?
No.
Okay, so let's move through
gun
these
violence.
very quickly, and then we'll move into other people's priorities.
Absolutely.
Yep.
I want to state very quickly, I am a firearms instructor. I was in the military for about 8 years. I deployed 3 times in service to our country, 3 separate tours. And I understand the use of most platforms of firearms. And I would love to talk to anyone about that at a more appropriate time.
Thank you. Mr. Dugas.
And thank you for your service.
Yes, sir.
Because of people like you, we have this opportunity to have free speech and also free elections.
Yes, sir.
So gun violence in schools is it's wasting a lot of time for our teachers, and also we designed schools 30 years ago where you walked in and you walked into an auditorium. We had to go back and actually redesign these same schools where you walk in and there's a corridor to bring you to the office, so you have to go through the office before you get into schools. And I'm proud to say that the school I graduated with and also my grandmother graduated in 1935 is one of the few schools left in the state that has no fence around it. I think that's very important that we're locking up our kids to teach them. It's a shame. We're locking up our teachers. We have a protocol now that the teacher's door has to be locked at all times. Is that the way at your school, ma'am?
Not at the college level, but at the elementary level, we have different protocols.
Yeah,
I'm not sure about saying.
this is not a.
No, we do it at high school. We have to lock our
You
doors.
lock
Yeah,
your doors and your
lock them down. This ain't a healthy environment for our babies to be taught in. It's it's affecting everybody's way we look at things, and but it's a topic that needs to be discussed. I think we need to discuss it much more in the future. Personally, I think it's more of a mental health issue than a actual. The gun don't jump up and shoot itself, but there's no fear of God. First of all, when I grew up, there was 3 people I feared: my mom, my dad, and God. And I knew God would forgive me, so I still fear my mom, and my dad's passed away. And but we definitely need to continue this discussion. We need to come up with some intelligent answers. We're intelligent people. We can get along and talk about it and get these issues worked out. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Mathurin.
I am with Quinta 100%. We're not securing our schools or our children. Where I teach, I'll give you an instance. Our school board paid to have this consultant company come in to tell us how to secure our schools. The only way to secure a school is to ask those who work there. We are the only ones who can secure that school, because at the end of the day, we don't have a police officer, we don't have law enforcement. Second of all, they're asking us at 1 year, I don't think it's this year, but a few years ago, they told us when we have an active shooter, give the kids books, and if he comes in, throw the books at him. So now we're opening up the kids to a weapon. We as educators know what's best for our children. If you're not in the classroom, that's a big factor of why I'm running. Too many non-educators are trying to put education laws in the books, and they're not with the kids. I teach PE, so I'm out behind the school most of the time. I'm surrounded by 3 cane fields, so I'm open. So are my children. There is a fence around to protect us, but there's nothing. If there's somebody in that cane field, we are sitting ducks. I don't have a gymnasium because none of our elementary schools do. So we're stuck being outside in the open. So securing our schools is definitely an issue and a priority for me, because our young kids, including my son, I have a 15-year-old, that's an issue. If we can't secure our kids, we want to go home. And some days you just don't realize that our job is more just as dangerous as someone in law enforcement, because we not only have to deal with active shooters, we have to deal with kids that are fighting with each other. So when we have to break up these children, we're putting our lives at danger, because we had a teacher recently that was hit in the middle of a fight. So securing our schools. Now, I agree with the Second Amendment, but as Justice Scalia said, the Second Amendment, the right to bear arms, does not necessarily mean the right to bear all arms. So I agree with Ms. Thompson, and I will work to find more ways and better ways to secure our campuses.
So we've got a few things going on right now. We're in our last half hour. I do see question cards being written, and we want to get those up here as soon as possible and start working them in. We have been hearing a lot from the center of our panel table here, and I'm wondering if Ms. Mathurin and Ms. Thompson will let me pass this priority question to Mr. Levy at the end, since we got
Just do one response because I
one
didn't get to
response from Ms.
respond to
Thompson, yes.
Yes, like I said, but it's being the sportsman paradise. Trust me, I love some deer sausage. It's delicious, but it shouldn't be riddled with bullets. If you can't shoot, a normal weapon, I would say, then you're not a hunter. And, several of you mentioned like kids fighting. I would much rather my children use fists than weapons. We have had several students just since the graduation were shot and killed in Iberia Parish. And it's that they have access to weapons when they shouldn't. It's, it's just ridiculous. I can't believe that my kids have to fear that if they're in a vehicle that looks like someone else's vehicle, they may be shot. And I'll leave it there.
Okay, I've got to tell you, we've got 3 very juicy questions here. So I would like, if it's okay, to read them and give Mr. Levy the opportunity first crack of answering any of them, or he can proceed with giving us his priority. Does that sound good? Let's just get the questions on the table. Okay, so question number 1, I have been strongly encouraging my child to leave the state after college because I see no future for him in our state. The effects of climate change and lack of job diversity gives me little hope for the future of our state. Do you support the Green New Deal, and what are your plans for bringing green energy jobs to Acadiana? So that's question number 1. The second question is, it references Mr. Levy, actually. Would you be willing to give companies tax breaks if they agree to raise wages for their employees to $15 an hour without laying off workers to do it? And then the final question, also a labor question, would you be in favor of changing or getting rid of Louisiana's right-to-work law to a real right-to-work law, and support or even encourage labor unions in Louisiana? So we've got children being urged to move out of state because of no jobs. We've got ITEP and whether they can encourage raising the minimum wage, and the right to work. Mr. Lee, would you like to respond to any of those questions?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to all 3, actually.
Well, go for it.
Kind of do it all in one shot. So Louisiana's 50th in pretty much everything. Everybody's leaving. We are completely ruled essentially by the Republican Party. We have one Democrat. We have the Democrat governor, and he seems to be their reason for every problem that we have. Doesn't make any sense whatsoever. The entire Republican Party is owned by corporations. They are all paid. So we're going to have to make some changes here. We're going to have to boot these people out. I don't know how we're going to do it, but we're going to have to get rid of organizations like LABI, which is Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, who has just built a building, a huge building right by the Capitol. All they do is purchase legislators. That's all they do all day long. We have to get rid of LOGA, Louisiana Oil and Gas Association. I'm in the oil and gas business. That's what I do. They are a cancer on our society. They are purchasing all of these politicians. Our entire legislature is paralyzed. We can't do anything. All these people up here want to make changes. We can't make any changes because they won't let it happen. Jeff Landry, John Kennedy, Bill Cassidy, Clay Higgins, all of these people are owned. They're not going to allow any of this to happen. These people have to be removed from office. We have to get rid of, at the root level, we have to get rid of Louisiana Association of Business and Industry, and we have to get rid of LOGA, Louisiana Oil and Gas Association. They propose that they represent companies like mine, Petro Technologies. They do not. What they do is they represent themselves. And what they want to do is they want to privatize everything and split it up amongst themselves. They want to privatize prisons. They want to privatize schools. They want to privatize medical care. They want to privatize everything, split it up amongst themselves because they believe that they are the chosen people to rule over everyone else, and it has to stop.
Thank you. I see red bars, perhaps on these questions from Ms. Bork, Ms. Thompson, and Mr. Levier. So let's hear from Ms. Bork on this.
So I just wanted to speak a little bit on the ITEP. I'm not sure what district you're in.
48.
48. Okay. My district, I am running as a Democrat. It is a very red district, and the conversations I've been having, I'm really trying hard to take off the party hat and listen to people and hear about their concerns. One of the things when I first started running was to try to learn ITEP as best as I could. I kind of have a different approach to Mr. Levy as far as doing away with the whole program. I think that we should give incentives to corporations that are bringing in jobs and revenue for our state. It doesn't necessarily have to just be oil and gas, though. We do have to find a way to incentivize a diverse economy, which I think when we talk, kind of our theme we've had, besides progress, is how do we keep our people here in the state. Some of the conversations I've been having, though, with Republicans, and I do get differing thoughts, but a lot of people say that the people here don't want, they bring in corporations, and then I got this today on my Facebook, and they just, they have to end up bringing other people in because people just don't want to work here. I don't have proof of what he's talking about, and neither did he give me proof, but, that is something that you hear. There's also what I get a lot is something called legacy lawsuits, which is basically trial lawyers and why corporations aren't wanting to move here because of contamination from a long time ago. So I feel like we should have an ITEP, but we need to do it better. We need to have the cost benefit analysis, and whether it's every 2 years or it's not given big 10-year lump exemptions. We are a poor state. We do not have the luxury to give anything away at this point. But if you are bringing in jobs or revenue, I do think that we should give a break for that.
Okay, so we have the ITEP question directed to Mr. Levy. We've had a response from Mr. Bork. I saw a red baton from Mr. Levy going very quickly, so let's have a little bit of follow-up on this, and then we'll go to the other red bars I'm seeing.
Okay, I have a machine shop, 15,000 square foot machine shop. I purchased those machines. I received the ITEP exemption. The ITEP exemption needs to go. It has no bearing on whether or not I'm going to be in this state or not. It's a very small portion of a part of my business. It's not relevant. Also, you got to understand that when I do business, we put stuff on a truck and it goes down the road. So the road needs to be repaired. So we need to throw in and we need to help and we need to pay for that infrastructure. These tax exemptions are ridiculous. And I'm going to give you a good example. Ralph Abraham has a Cirrus SR22. I bought one in 2008 for $550,000.
That's a plane.
It's an airplane. So if you purchase a personal airplane, you are exempt from 5% use tax by writing a letter to the Louisiana Louisiana Tax Association.
Department of Revenue.
Department of Revenue.
Those people.
$22,000 tax exemption I got from my personal airplane that I bought in 2008. It made no difference. I mean, in 2008, they were letting anybody borrow any kind of money that you wanted. And I way overbought. I shouldn't have bought that airplane, but I could borrow the money. $22,000 had absolutely no bearing on whether or not I was going to buy a $550,000 airplane like Ralph Abraham is flying today. It is ridiculous that these people in government are giving themselves these ridiculous tax breaks, like ITEP, like the first constitutional amendment that's going to be on the ballot, where the inventory taxes for the oil field equipment, which I will have to pay too, I guess, it's not going to make any difference whether or not we stay in the state or not. What it will make a difference is whether or not your roads or your schools or your health care is funded. What you got to understand is that the politicians, by doing this, they're just getting money directly from these corporations. It's ridiculous. It goes from the corporation to LABI directly into the politicians' pockets. We are 50th in everything. It's time to just flush them all out, get rid of them all.
Okay, so we've got red batons from Ms. Thompson, Ms. Mathurin, Mr. Levier, and Ms. Gleason. Again, the questions we have before us are, why should young people stay here? We've got Green New Deal, actually, from another questioner, so it might be good to get to that. I think we've dealt with ITEP pretty much, unless anyone else has anything to say, and this question of right to work versus a real right to work. So let's hear from Ms. Thompson on any or all of those questions. Maybe not all.
Well, I was going to respond to it about, our young people wanting to leave the state. And I understand that many people, hopefully we all want our children to do better than we are. And unfortunately, right now, it's looking like they have to leave in order to do better. But then what is left behind? I want our children to feel that they always have a place here. And like he said, if we're taking that $22,000 could have helped educate several young people to be able to do jobs here in our state, so that these companies that Ms. Bork spoke about aren't having to look elsewhere to bring in, people to come and work. Also, if we give them a decent wage, a lot of times we're thinking about minimum wage and we're thinking about the person who's working at McDonald's, the teenager who just wants a little spending money. But we have people who are working multiple minimum wage jobs in order to put food on their table. And again, if we can educate them and we can get them into a better situation, we can get them with a trade, with some type of skilled labor, we'll have industries who want to come here because we have the skilled labor. So that can, work wonders in several areas. So.
Thank you. Ms. Mathurin.
I'll talk a little bit more on leaving the state. A lot of our young kids are leaving the state, number one, because our TOPS program promises them things and winds up pulling back because we don't have the money. But it's also really important for our education system to offer more hands-on programs. We need more welding classes across the state. We need more plumbing. We need more, if some of these businesses can incorporate with the, or work with the education system, we can, instead of offering these kids avenues of, okay, we know you probably won't go to college, but we know that you can get a trade. Instead of them just completely dropping out of school, why not offer them that trade? Why not offer them the programs and they can work while they're getting this certification? Even if we have to promote it in the middle school. If some of our middle school kids are not college bound and they know it, or they are not interested, but they want to be a welder, they want to do certain trades, why not offer the classroom part as an elective? I was never one to like art. So when I had to take art, I did it, but nowadays I wish I would have had something besides that. We've taken away all of the industries to help, and all of the classes to help promote our kids in society. We've taken away home ec. We've taken away woodworking in some parishes. We've taken away child development in some parishes. You know, we need to promote more of our technology, not technology, but more of our workforce, our plumbers, our electricians, help them to get a trade instead of just dropping out and wind up on the street. So, and as for the right to work state, I disagree with someone being able to be fired just because. I think we should have some kind of job security because the people with hope work better. If you go to work every day stressed out, not knowing if you're going to have a job or not because they don't like you, I don't think that is productive for our society. So I think we need to tweak the right to work issue.
Thank you. Okay, so now just before we go to Mr. Levier and Ms. Gleason, and we have Ms. Thompson again, I just want to remind you there are 2 Green New Deal questions. 2 of our audience members want to hear about Green New Deal, green collar jobs, so extra points for anyone who wants to tackle those. Mr. Levier, we come to you.
Right, the Green New Deal. I am not educated in Green New Deals. I am educated, however, I look around me and everything I see is green. The trees, the grass, and sometimes you got to be able to use your common sense. The Green New Deal sounds good, but I would like to examine it further on my own and determine if that's something that I would promote or support. I want to because it sounds nice, but how many things have sounded nice and then destroyed families or did things? So one of the things that, you know, I want to do is make sure that we're aware of everything moving forward, even the things that sound good. And as far as kids leaving, the grass is not always greener on the other side. That's what my mom told me. And I found it to be true in most cases, unfortunately. When you think that you have your hand around the greatest blessing you can have, some kind of way just evaporates. And then you got to go back and say, you know what, Mom, you were right. I should have stayed focused on this. I should have done this differently. So leaving is not always the best solution. I understand that some people are going to leave. They are by nature explorers or wanderers or travelers. Some people are going to leave. It doesn't matter what you do. They're born to go everywhere. But in order to reset our infrastructure and correct the things that we have problems with at home, some of us are going to have to stay. And the parents that are facing these situations, each situation is unique, and every person should have a reason why. If you believe your children should stay or go, that's your thing. But make sure that we're allowing them the freedom of mind and freedom of expression in order for them to make their own decision and then have a good reason for that decision. If my son came to me and said, Dad, I want to leave Louisiana because I don't feel there are opportunities here. My friend just got killed by the police right down the street. I don't want to stay here. Well, I'm going to explain to him that not all officers are bad officers. There are opportunities, and that you have the power to create an opportunity out of nothing. That's how we all came to be. Our parents didn't always have creating us on their minds. It just happened, and now we're here. So we have, as human beings, the power to manifest our reality, and that's one of the things that I teach my children. So in response to, I'm sorry, y'all got to stick that red thing a little farther out there. I agree with the tax breaks and increasing the wages, and also every person should have a right to protect their livelihood. It is a sense. Dignity is something that we should give one another, and it is not dignified for me to tell you, because I don't like you, you better do what I like, or I'm going to cut your livelihood. I'm going to cut your opportunities. That is the definition of racism. And we cannot allow that, and it's not good. So we have to change some things about how we operate. And like Mr. Dugas said, we got to do it together.
Thank you. I want to move on to Ms. Gleason, but before I do, because she may want to weigh in on this question, as may Ms. Thompson, we have a question about Fortnite, the online video game, which has been banned in several countries. The game is free with an app and available to anyone. The game increases violence and bullying in schools. What do you suggest for parents, teachers, as regulations for this violent game where kids have to kill people virtually? So that kind of takes us back to an earlier question of parenting. It might be something you want to address. And I'll just put on the table that before we end today, we're going to have a final question about if any of you are taking corporate PAC money. But Ms. Gleason, on any of the previous questions before, where would you like to weigh in?
I guess I just want to address a couple of things. I agree regarding what Mr. Levy said about this corporate model that is affecting us here in Louisiana. And the thing is, we have a fairly functioning capitalist system. But when the corporate model affects that, it not only affects our wages, it affects the quality of the products that we're buying as consumers. It also affects competition. And recently I was talking with my dad, and we were talking about how, like, for example, Amazon is starting to threaten even companies like Walmart. They're going to essentially obliterate the concept of competition in our capitalist structure. That is a threat that we've got to pay attention to, and that model is, I see it as a threat that comes from the national level. Louisiana is, the way we do things is different, I think, and I'm proud of that from other folks. We appreciate humanity and efficiency here, and when it comes to how our legislature is run and who is bought, as you say, and who is sort of supporting that corporatist model, I completely agree with you. Their concept of the ITAP itself, in and of itself, is not necessarily a threat. In fact, it can be used and improved, and we do need to have some sort of incentivization when it comes to bringing in other businesses, but it needs to be regulated. It needs to be very well managed, and it should not be some sort of a conduit to buy legislatures. That's 100% right. What we need in our legislature is balance, and with an imposing supermajority, we are not going to have that balance in our legislature. We need to understand that the quality of life and our humanity and the efficiency that we want to live by, we need to come together and work on those concepts at the legislative level, so that we can bring prosperity to our local business owners, to our school system, and protect those fundamental basics that are part of a competitive capitalist system. So,
Okay, we're actually coming very close to our time, so Ms. Thompson, a very quick final comment from you, and then we'll ask the PAC money question.
Okay, I just wanted to mention that we've talked about, trades and stuff like that. I just want to make sure I say that just because someone isn't going to college doesn't mean that they lack the intelligence. It can be a choice. College is not for everyone. So we need to bring things back into the school that are skills that everyone can use. We've taken cursive out of schools. That's crazy. When there were recent upsets in elections and votes had to be recounted, they had to find people who could read cursive because the workers couldn't. Things, giving other skills, a child learning sign language can receive $20 an hour at universities to sign for other students while actually attending classes themselves. We have many adults who do that also. I want, if they leave the state, it to be a choice and not being forced because there aren't any opportunities here. I also wanted to mention that, everyone up here is very passionate, and there were comments about, Republicans and being bought. I don't think everyone is bought. I think most of people running for public office go into it with a servant leadership in mind, that we're here to serve. Along the way, some are corrupted. I don't believe all are. And not too long ago, both Republicans and Democrats believed in climate change. And with the Koch brothers, billions of dollars, they were able to influence this fake news talk and get people to believe that that's something, the science didn't exist, which is untrue. And I think we can all see that today. Just last week, like Mr. Levy mentioned, that Beaumont was underwater. A few years ago, Lafayette was underwater. And I think we all see these effects of climate change, and that the Green New Deal may not be the answer, but we need to take a look at it. Something maybe.
Thank you. Okay, let's just go down the row, starting with Ms. Bork. Yes or no, are you taking PAC money?
I accepted one contribution from LAE, Louisiana Association of Educators.
I accepted money from LEA and the home builders.
those are not corporate PACs.
No,
So,
but
yeah,
that's,
yeah, I'm accepting no corporate PAC money.
No.
I've only accepted from LAE. I won't accept corporate PACs.
I haven't accepted any money from corporate PACs.
No.
Okay. Well, we are almost at time, so I'm going to have the last word today and thank all of our panelists, first of all, again, for running for office, and secondly, for being here. And I'd like to ask the audience to join me in a round of applause for this wonderful panel. Thank you very much.